The observation deck of the consensus station Eternal Witness was a silent bubble of tranquility against the backdrop of interstellar war. Kale, a Xylos historian observer, pressed his long, gray fingers against the cool transparency, his large black eyes reflecting the distant flashes of silent explosions along the cerulean front. His people were pacifists by deep culture, but they served as the galaxy's memory, documenting conflict to hopefully learn from it. This assignment, however, felt like an insult. A new ripple in the void caught his attention. Ships translated into real space near the staging beacon. These were not the sleek, organic curves of the consensus vessels, nor the terrifying biological masses of the Ravager swarm. These were angular, blocky, and utilitarian. Scorch marks and patched armor plates were visible even from this distance. The human fleet had arrived. Kale sighed, a soft rustle of his fibrous robes. He had read the briefings. The United Earth Federation, a young and fractious species, had only recently achieved stable faster-than-light travel. Their intervention in the Consensus Swarm War was a political compromise, a desperate move by a desperate galactic senate. He was to be their assigned observer, to document their integration. He viewed it as busy work for a junior analyst, not a veteran of his standing. He made his way to the docking umbilical. The air changed as the human airlock cycled. It was warmer, heavier with oxygen and unfamiliar organic scents, synthetic lubricant, a faint acrid smell he later learned was coffee, and the unique odor of human bodies. The delegation that greeted him was small. Captain Lee Jun stood at the front. He was shorter than Kale, with dark hair cropped close and a face that gave little away. His uniform was simple, a dark gray fabric with minimal insignia. "Observer Kale," Lee Jun said, his voice calm and even. "I am Captain Lee Jun of the UEFS Steadfast. Welcome." Kale gave the formal bow of his people. "Captain, the consensus welcomes your assistance." He gestured for them to follow. "Your quarters and briefing schedules are prepared. Your ships will be directed to auxiliary berths." As they walked through the gleaming corridors of the station, Kale watched the humans. They moved with a quiet alertness, their eyes constantly scanning ceilings, junctions, and doorways. They did not speak much to each other, but their communication was in subtle gestures and glances. They seemed, to Kale, like creatures walking through a forest they expected to be dangerous. The initial briefing with Consensus Command was a lesson in polite dismissal. The commanders, a trio of different species, explained the situation on Lyra 3. The swarm was consuming the planet's core, and a high-yield plasma bombardment was scheduled to sterilize the continent. Lee Jun studied the tactical hologram. "The bombardment will collapse the planetary crust and render the core minerals inaccessible for a century," he stated, not as a question. "That is the cost of cleansing the swarm," replied the insectoid Vrel commander, its mandibles clicking. "We have an alternative proposal," Lee Jun said. "A ground assault. Our analysis suggests the primary swarm conduits are tunnel-based. We can insert teams here and here." He pointed to map coordinates. "We can clear the tunnels with precision, collapse only the infected zones, and preserve 70% of the mining infrastructure." A ripple of disbelief went through the command. A ground assault? Against the swarm in its own tunnels? It was considered suicide. "That is not our tactical doctrine," the aquatic cell said, bubbles floating from its respirator. "Our doctrine is flexible," Lee Jun replied simply. "We are prepared to execute this. The resources preserved could be vital to the war effort." After a long, silent communication between the commanders, permission was grudgingly given. It was clear they saw it as a way for the humans to expend themselves usefully. Later, Kale found some of the human soldiers in their designated mess area. They were not using the nutrient dispensers. Instead, they were heating pouches of their own food, the smells strong and varied. One, a female with a sharp gaze and her hair tied tightly back, Sergeant Park Mina, offered him a small, brown square. "It's chocolate," she said. "Not poison." He took it, examining the strange object. He took a small bite. An intense, sweet, and complex flavor filled his mouth. It was unlike anything in consensus databases. One of the soldiers, a young man named Choi Jin, was showing others a flat image of two older humans and a younger girl, smiling. "My sister," he said, pointing. "She starts university next month." Kale watched this, puzzled. They were on the edge of a horrific war zone, about to embark on a mission others considered a death sentence, and they were sharing food and talking about family. He returned to his quarters and began his first report. "Physically unimpressive," he dictated. "Their technology is a generation behind. Their social behaviors are distractingly sentimental. Their proposed tactic on Lyra 3 is a regression to primitive, high-casualty infantry combat. Their motivation appears tied to material preservation, not strategic victory. Initial assessment: low projected impact. Likely to be quickly overwhelmed, providing minor tactical distraction." He sent the report and looked out the viewport at the blocky, scarred human ships, thinking they looked like old, stubborn stones in a stream of polished metal. He felt a faint, unfamiliar unease. The dropship screamed through the atmosphere of Lyra 3. Inside, the cabin was a world of roaring engines and red battle light. Kale was strapped into a harness, his slender frame jolting with every burst of turbulence. He wore a simple environmental suit, a courtesy of the humans, but he felt terrifyingly exposed. Across from him, Sergeant Park Mina's squad sat in 2 rows. They were checking weapons, securing armor plates, their faces calm under helmets that reflected the crimson glow. They did not look like soldiers about to die. They looked like workers about to start a difficult job. Captain Lee Jun's voice crackled over the squad's internal channel. 30 seconds. Primary objective is the eastern tunnel mouth. Secure the entrance. Let the swarm come to the choke point. Remember your spacing. There were no grand speeches. Only clear, simple instructions. Park Mina nodded, though the captain couldn't see her. "Copy. All right, Reapers. Helmets sealed. Weapons hot. Choi, you're on point with me. Let's go home for dinner." The dropship landed with a heavy thud in the muddy field. The rear ramp slammed down, revealing a landscape of gray rock and sickly, purple swarm biomass crawling over distant ridges. The air was thin and cold. "Go, go, go!" Park Mina yelled. The squad moved. They did not run wildly. They flowed out in a practice pattern, each soldier covering a specific arc of fire. Kale stumbled after them, his recording device held shakily in his hand. The consensus observers usually watched from orbit. This was unprecedented. They reached the jagged opening of the tunnel. It was not a natural formation. It was a bored hole, its edges slick with a hardening bioresin. From the deep darkness within, a chittering, clicking sound began to echo, growing louder. "They're coming," Park Mina said, her voice flat. "Hold the line. Grenadiers. Ready." Kale watched the tunnel mouth, his heart pounding in his thin chest. Then they emerged. Ravager swarm warriors were nightmares of chitin and sharp limbs, moving with a jerky, terrifying speed. Their primary weapons were natural bone blades and glands that spat globs of corrosive plasma. The humans opened fire. It was not the silent beams of energy Kale was used to seeing. It was a deafening, physical roar. Their weapons threw small pieces of metal at impossible speeds. The sound was shocking, a brutal percussion that beat against his senses. Where energy beams would scorch and cauterize, these kinetic rounds shattered chitin, ripped through soft tissue, and sprayed thick, dark fluid across the tunnel walls. The swarm did not stop. They never did. They came in a mindless, churning wave. But the humans did not break. Park Mina's squad fired in short, controlled bursts. One soldier would fire while another reloaded. They called out to each other in short, clipped words. "Reloading. Covering. Left flank. More coming. Frag out." A soldier pulled a pin from a metal egg and threw it deep into the tunnel. The explosion was a concussive thump that sent shrapnel and swarm parts flying back out of the entrance. Kale realized with a start that they were not trying to destroy every single swarm creature. They were hurting them. Their fire was shaping the flow of the enemy, funneling them into specific kill zones where the overlapping fire from their weapons was most effective. They used the tunnel's own structure against its makers. Then, a plasma glob hit the rock face above a soldier named Kim. Shards of superheated stone showered down. Kim cried out, falling back, his armor smoking. "Kim's hit!" Someone shouted. Two soldiers immediately dragged Kim back behind a large boulder, never stopping their fire at the tunnel. Park Mina scrambled over to them. She didn't look at the horrific burn on his arm with horror. She looked at it with a clinical speed. She pulled a canister from her belt and sprayed a thick foam over the wound. "You'll live, you idiot," she barked, though her hands were gentle. "Now cover the rear." The fight went on for what felt like hours. The humans did not tire. Their movements became more economical, their communication reduced to grunts and hand signals, but they did not falter. Finally, the flow from the tunnel slowed to a trickle, then stopped. The only sounds were the hiss of cooling weapons, the heavy breathing of the soldiers, and the distant moan of the wind. Park Mina stood up, her armor smeared with mud and alien fluid. "Choi Han, forward sweep. 10 meters only. Report." As the two scouts moved cautiously into the dark, Kale looked around. The ground was littered with broken swarm bodies. The humans had not just held the position. They had turned it into a slaughterhouse of their own design. And they had done it not with superior energy weapons, but with coordination, terrain, and sheer, brutal persistence. A voice came over the comms. It was Captain Lee Jun, still in orbit. "Reaper Squad, report status." "Entrance secured," Park Mina said, her voice tired but steady. "Minor injury. Tunnel clear for 500 meters. Ready for demolition teams." "Acknowledged. Good work." Kale looked down at his recording device. It had captured everything. He thought of his first report calling their tactics primitive. He saw now that primitive did not mean ineffective. It meant fundamental. It meant violence stripped back to its most direct, personal form. They didn't fight from a safe distance. They fought in the mud with the enemy close enough to smell. Back in his quarters on the station that night, he amended his report. His voice was quieter now. "Tactical assessment requires revision. Their methods are not crude. They are optimized for a different paradigm. They do not engage in fleet warfare. They engage in intimate killing. They use terrain, sound, and fear as weapons. They treat the battlefield not as a chessboard, but as a close-quarters brawl. Most unsettling is their resilience under sustained horror. They do not break. They adapt. Further observation is necessary." He looked out at the stars, but now he saw the muddy tunnel mouth on Lyra 3 and the small, determined figures holding it. The dead moon, Kalidar, hung against the blackness like a rotten fruit. Its surface was a maze of canyons carved by ancient rivers that had vanished a billion years before. Consensus scanners had found something under the dust. A structure. It was not swarm. It was older, a relic of a precursor race. More importantly, it was broadcasting a faint, complex signal that interfered with the lower frequencies of the swarm's hive mind. Consensus Command was excited. This could be a weapon or a key. A science team was dispatched, and Kale went with them, expecting to witness a triumph of galactic archaeology. The humans, as auxiliary forces, sent a small escort and one of their own researchers, a quiet man named Dr. Kim Tae. The structure was not a building. It was a series of interconnected chambers grown from a single, crystal-like material that glowed with a soft inner light. The entrance was a large, circular door covered in shifting symbols that made Kale's eyes hurt. It was locked. The Consensus Science Team, led by a brilliant Vrel scientist named XIX, set to work immediately. They set up powerful sensor arrays. They projected complex decoding algorithms onto the door. They tried to match the symbol patterns to known precursor languages. They treated the door as a complex physics or mathematical problem. For 3 days they worked. The door remained closed, its symbols pulsing gently. Indifferent to their logic, Kale watched, recording their diligent failure. He noticed Dr. Kim Tae. The human was not with the main science team. He had been given a small, portable scanner and mostly left to his own devices. He did not look at the door as a problem to be solved. Kim Tae walked around the entire exterior of the structure, his boots kicking up gray dust. He did not scan for energy signatures. Instead, he looked at the way the dust had settled in the grooves of the crystal. He noted where the material was slightly worn, where it was smooth. He placed his hand, bare, against the wall, closing his eyes. He was listening, but not with his ears on the third day. As XIX and his team argued over a new decryption model, Kim Tae was sitting cross-legged in the dust before the door, humming a low, tuneless song. Kale approached him, curious.
Doktor Kimo.
Do you have a theory? Kim Tae looked up, his glasses reflecting the door's soft light. Theories? Many. But they are asking the wrong question. What is the right question? Kale asked. They are asking, how does this lock work? Kim Tae said softly. They should ask, why was this door closed? Kale did not understand. A lock's purpose was to be opened by the correct key. It was a security mechanism. Kim Tae stood up, brushing dust from his pants. He walked to the door, ignoring the busy scientists. He did not touch the symbols. Instead, he knelt and placed his palm flat against a smooth, seemingly blank section of the floor directly in front of the threshold. He closed his eyes again. The wear patterns, he murmured, more to himself than to Kale. Not from traffic, from someone sitting here, for a long time. A guardian? A mourner? He opened his eyes and looked at the symbols not as code, but as art, as emotion. He saw a repeating, flowing pattern that the computers had classified as a security protocol. Kim Tae saw a sigh. The consensus approach is to shout the correct password at the door, he said. But what if the door is not locked? What if it is sleeping, and you do not shout at a sleeping thing you wish to know? You whisper. He then did something that made 19's team stop and stare in horror. He began to tap on the crystal floor with his knuckles. Not in a random way, in a slow, rhythmic pattern.
Top, top, top.
Pause.
Top, top, top.
It is not a code, Kim Tae whispered. It is a heartbeat. He then placed both hands on the door and hummed again, matching the pitch of the crystal's inner hum, but slowing it down, deepening it. He was not attacking the system. He was sympathizing with it. He was telling the long-dead builder, I understand your loneliness. With a sound like a deep breath, the symbols on the door faded. The entire circular slab, seamless moments before, split into 6 segments that spiraled inward and vanished into the walls. The doorway was open. Cool, still air from within flowed out. There was absolute silence from the consensus team. 19's mandibles were parted in shock. Their sensors, their algorithms, their mighty intellects had been useless. Kim Tae stood up, looking into the darkness within. It was a tomb, he said, his voice full of a strange sadness. Not a fortress. They weren't keeping us out. They were keeping their sorrow in. We should be respectful. He stepped inside, his small human flashlight piercing the ancient dark. Kale stood frozen, his recorder running. The victory was not one of intellect over intellect. It was something else entirely. The human had not solved a puzzle. He had listened to a story. He had used empathy as a key. Later, in his report, Kale struggled for words. The human, Dr. Kim, succeeded where advanced science failed. He did not use superior technology. He used a form of intuitive anthropology. He viewed the artifact not as a machine, but as a cultural relic with emotional intent. This is a dangerous form of thinking. It is unpredictable. It bypasses logic. To approach the unknown not with caution, but with a desire for understanding, even emotional understanding, is a profound deviation from normative xenostudies. It suggests a mentality that can bridge gaps logic cannot. This is not a tool. It is a lens, and it sees things we choose not to see. He looked at the data stream from the open tomb, now buzzing with discovery, and felt a chill. The humans did not just master their environment. They tried to converse with it even with the dead. The human section of the station had a different atmosphere after Lyra 3. It was not celebration. It was a quiet, focused energy. Soldiers cleaned weapons and repaired armor with methodical care. There was talk, but it was lower, often ending in soft laughter that faded quickly. Kale moved among them, trying to understand the shape of their morale. He found Sergeant Parkmina in a small workshop off the mess hall. She was not cleaning her rifle. She was carefully engraving a small, flat piece of dark metal with a fine-tipped tool. Her face, usually a mask of sharp alertness, was soft with concentration. Kale approached slowly. "Sergeant Park? What is that you are making?" She did not look up, her hand moving with steady precision. "A name tag, for Choi Jin's locker." Kale recalled the young soldier who had shown the picture. "Is he unwell?" "He's fine. His tour is over. He's going home. Ship leaves tomorrow." She blew metal dust from the tag. "It's a tradition. You get your tag when you ship out. So we remember you." Kale was confused. "Remember him? But he is alive. He will be on Earth." Parkmina finally looked at him. Her eyes held something Kale could not name. "Out there we remember everyone. The ones who leave and the ones who don't." Later that day, a different kind of chaos erupted. A medical alert echoed through the human corridors. Kale followed the running crew members to a small loading bay. A soldier was on the ground, 2 medics working frantically on him. His environmental suit was torn, and a strange, oily black substance writhed over his chest where the fabric was ripped. It was a piece of swarm biomaterial, latent, brought back on a piece of equipment from Lyra 3. The soldier was Choi Jin. His face was pale, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. Parkmina was there, pushing through the crowd. She didn't try to help the medics. She dropped to her knees beside Choi Jin's head, grabbing his hand. "Jin, look at me," she said, her voice fierce, not gentle. "Look at me. You're not going anywhere. You hear me? Your sister's wedding is next month. You're walking her down the aisle." Choi Jin's eyes, wide with pain, focused on her face. He tried to speak, but only a wet cough came out. "You promised her, you idiot," Parkmina continued, her grip tightening on his hand. "You told her you'd be there. So you fight this. You fight right now." The medics injected him with a counteragent. The black substance hissed and shriveled. Choi Jin's body seized once, then went limp, his eyes closing. The lead medic looked up. "He's stable. We got it in time. He'll live." A collective sigh went through the bay. Parkmina sat back on her heels, releasing Choi Jin's hand. For a moment, her fierce expression crumbled into pure exhaustion. Then she stood up, nodded to the medics, and walked away without another word. Kale watched her go. He had seen injuries before. He had seen death. In the consensus forces, wounded were removed, treated by machines, their status updated on a logistics screen. It was clean, efficient. This was not efficient. This was raw, personal, and messy. The human had almost died, and his commander had not quoted regulations. She had shouted about a wedding. That night, Kale could not stop thinking about it. He accessed the Human Historical Database, a public archive they had opened to him. He searched not for their great victories, but for their hardest battles. The words were strange, from an old human language called English. He read about Verdun, a battle in a place called France on Earth. The numbers were shocking. Hundreds of thousands of humans died over months for a few miles of destroyed ground. The descriptions spoke of mud, constant shelling, and soldiers living in holes in the earth. The goal was not to win. It was to make the other side bleed so much they gave up. It was called a war of attrition. He read about Stalingrad, a city turned into a ruin. Humans fought for single rooms in broken buildings for months. In freezing cold, they did not retreat. The report stated the defenders were often poorly supplied, but they used the rubble itself as a weapon. They fought with a stubbornness that defied all military logic. He read about Incheon, a desperate, risky landing of forces against terrible odds. Should have failed. It succeeded because the humans relied on surprise, on knowing the tides, on moving fast into a place they were not expected. Each story was a lesson in a different kind of suffering and will. Verdun was about enduring hell. Stalingrad was about refusing to break in a broken place. Incheon was about boldness in the face of certainty. The pattern was clear. Human military history was not a tale of clean, technological superiority. It was a dark recipe book for how to survive the unsurvivable, how to turn desperation into a weapon, how to pay a price in blood that no one else was willing to pay. Just to say no. He thought of Park Mina holding Choi Jin's hand, anchoring him to a future wedding. He thought of the soldiers on Lyra 3, fighting in the mud not for glory, but to complete the mission so they could all go home. Their strength was not in their weapons. It was in the things they fought for. And those things, a sister, a friend, a home, were so small, so fragile, that they would do anything, endure anything, to protect them. Kale turned off his screen. The quiet of his room felt heavy. He began his new report, but his usual analytical tone was gone. His voice was a whisper. I have observed their connection to one another. It is not a weakness. It is the core of their tactical resilience. They do not fight for abstract ideals or strategic resources. They fight for the person beside them. They fight for a future they have promised to someone else. This makes their breaking point theoretical. They have a historical precedent for enduring beyond all logical breaking points. To defeat them, you would not have to break their army. You would have to break every individual promise, every memory, every hope, in every single one of their hearts. I do not know if that is possible. They measure cost in lives, and they have, repeatedly throughout their history, been willing to pay a higher price than anyone else could imagine. He sent the report and sat in the dark, seeing not stars, but the faces of soldiers in muddy trenches from a world he had never seen, their eyes holding the same stubborn light as Park Mina's. The Viridian Nebula was not empty space. It was a swirling soup of charged particles and exotic gases that played havoc with modern technology. It was a perfect hiding place for a swarm harvesting fleet, and the consensus finally located it. They moved to strike with overwhelming force. Kale was stationed on the bridge of the consensus command ship, ready to document a textbook victory. The battle began well. The sleek consensus cruisers unleashed volleys of coherent energy, carving into the bloated swarm bioships. Then the swarm adapted. They released a massive, pulsing wave of energy from a central hive ship, a psychic dampening field the scientists called a silence pulse. The effect was instant and catastrophic for the consensus fleet. The intricate network that connected every ship, every fighter, every soldier's helmet display. It vanished. The constant stream of tactical data, enemy positions, and command orders was replaced by a hollow, dead static. On the bridge, lights flickered. Holographic displays dissolved into meaningless sparks. The Vrel commander thrashed in its fluid tank, cut off from the chorus of its hive mind. The cell commander screens showed only emptiness. Panic, cold and efficient, set in. The consensus military was a single, beautiful mind. Now it was blind, deaf, and dumb. Ships collided with each other. Fighters, their navigation dead, spun off into the nebulous clouds. The swarm, operating on a simpler, instinctive hive signal, began to pick them apart. All units, fall back, the senior commander ordered, but the comms were dead. The order never left the ship. The great fleet began a slow, disorganized, and bloody retreat, each ship trying to save itself. Kale's recording device was dead. He watched the disaster unfold in silent horror. This was the end. The swarm had found the perfect weapon. Then he noticed the human squadron on the edge of the tactical plot, a crude local display that was barely functioning. The 4 blocky ships of the UEF, led by the Steadfast, were not retreating. They were holding position. Are they mad? The cell commander bubbled. They will be annihilated. On the bridge of the Steadfast, Captain Lee Jun watched the same chaos on his own screens. His main holotank was dark, but a smaller, older screen to his side showed a simple wireframe map. It was updating slowly, using basic radar and optical data. Lee Jun tapped a button on his command chair. A red light began to flash above him. A low, wailing siren sounded once through the ship. It was not an alarm of panic. It was a signal. Across the human ship's crews reacted. They switched off their network systems. They pulled down manual viewscopes. They began speaking into handheld radio units with limited range. Li Jun leaned toward an old, physical microphone. All UEF vessels, execute contingency Busan protocol. Form on my signal, tight diamond. Navigate by stellar reference. Gunnery optical targeting only. Switch to laser line communication. Kale, listening to the broken feed that was still coming from the Steadfast, heard the orders. They sounded ancient. The human ships began to move. They were not fleeing. They were forming up into a tight, simple formation, close enough to see each other with their own eyes on the planetoid below. A UEF Marine outpost had also gone silent. Sergeant Park Mina's squad was cut off. The voice of command was gone. Park didn't wait. She looked at her squad. All right, Reapers. Comms are down. That means they're down everywhere. We go to silent running. Whistle signals only. Han, you're on point. Move to the high ground. See what you can see. They moved not as a disconnected group, but as a single organism with a shared understanding. They used hand signals. A short whistle meant stop. 2 meant enemy sighted. They didn't need a network. They had drilled for this. They had expected the network to fail. In the nebula, the swarm ships, sensing easy prey, turned towards the isolated human diamond. The Steadfast didn't fire wildly. Li Jun waited. He watched the approaching blips on his basic radar. Wait for visual confirmation, he said, his voice calm. When the first swarm bioship filled the main viewport, he said, fire. The human kinetics were not affected by the dampening field. Their solid rounds tore into the swarm flesh ship. Without a network, their firing was less precise, but it was constant, a steady, hammering rain of metal. More importantly, they held their formation. They protected each other's blind spots. One ship's sensor loss was covered by another ship's optical cameras. They were not winning. They were holding. In the middle of the universal silence, they were creating their own small, noisy, stubborn pocket of resistance. The consensus command ship finally managed to jump to safety, dragging Kale with it. His last sight was of the 4 human ships, tiny against the nebula, their guns still flashing in the silent dark, holding the line so the others could escape. Back at the staging area, the mood was one of despair. The consensus had been broken by a new weapon. But the humans returned hours later. Their ships were battered, scorched, but intact. They had withdrawn only when the swarm fleet, confused by the stubborn resistance, had pulled back. Kale found Li Jun in a briefing, explaining to stunned consensus commanders. The protocol is simple. You assume all advanced systems will fail. You train for it. Your basic unit of combat cannot be the network. It must be the single ship, the single squad, the trusted individual making a decision in the dark. That night, Kale's report was frantic, urgent. We are wrong. Our entire doctrine is a vulnerability. The humans do not fear the silence. They assume it. They plan for it. Their strength is not in their connection, but in their ability to function without it. They trust each other, not the system. In the chaos, they do not become individuals. They become a pack that remembers how to hunt without a telepathic link. This is not an adaptation. This is their natural state of war. The silence pulse is not a weapon against them. It is merely the removal of a distraction. It reveals what they truly are. Consensus Command had decided. The swarm core world, a sickly green planet designated Omega-9, would be cleansed. The plan was total orbital bombardment. A rain of plasma would burn the atmosphere, melt the crust, and turn the world into a glassy tomb. It was final. It was clean. Captain Li Jun stood before the Council of Commanders in the war room. The hologram of Omega-9 glowed between them. He listened to the plan in silence. The bombardment will commence in 12 cycles. The Vrel commander stated, "It's Click's final." "There is another way," Li Jun said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Every alien I turned to him. Kale, standing in the observation niche, felt a cold thrill. He knew what was coming. Explain, the cell commander said, bubbles drifting upwards. The swarm's primary hives are deep. Kilometers down, Li Jun said. He pointed at the hologram highlighting subterranean networks. Your bombardment will destroy the surface. It will not reach the deepest dormant cores. They will survive in hibernation. In 50 years, 100, they will resurge. You will have won a battle and lost the war. Then what is your alternative? Devourers asked, a note of disdain in its clicks. A ground assault. A precision strike. Li Jun zoomed the hologram in on a specific pulsing nexus. Here, the central psychic node. We go in. We cut it out. The silence in the room was absolute. Then, a sound like rustling leaves. Alien laughter. Suicide. The cell commander stated. The atmospheric density is toxic. The surface is crawling with billions of swarm forms. Your forces would be consumed before they reached the target. Your forces would, Li Jun said without accusation. Mine are trained for it. A long, tense argument followed. Kale watched the human captain. He did not shout. He did not plead. He presented facts. Historical precedent from Earth. Success rates of deep strike operations in contaminated environments. He spoke of acceptable losses in a way that made the aliens recoil. Finally, worn down by his relentless, quiet logic, and with the memory of the Viridian Nebula fresh in their minds, the command relented. They would provide a diversionary fleet attack. The humans would have one window, a tiny, suicidal window. The atmosphere on the Steadfast was like a held breath. In the hangar bay, Sergeant Park Mina checked her squad's heavy assault gear. The armor was sealed, equipped with toxin filters. The weapons were larger, meant for sustained fire. Dr. Kim Tae was there too, looking out of place in a modified environmental suit. He was holding a data spike, a complex piece of technology. This is the key, he said to Park Mina. It contains a logic virus I designed from the patterns in the Kalidar tomb. It doesn't attack biology. It attacks the idea of the hive. It introduces silence, individuality. It will make the swarm mind lonely. Park Mina took the spike, securing it to her belt. So we just plug it in? Into the central node. Yes. Kim Tae's face was pale. It is a beautiful piece of code. In another time, it could have been a poem. The drop was a nightmare. The ships shook violently in the thick, green atmosphere. Anti-air fire from living spires below ripped into the formation. Ships fell, burning trails through the poisonous clouds. Kale, watching from orbit via a shaky video feed from Park Mina's helmet, felt sick. They landed in a clearing that was not clear for long. The swarm came from the ground, the air, the dripping trees. It was a waking hell of teeth and claws and acid. Move! To the tunnel entrance. Park Mina's voice was a raw shout over the comms, filled with static. Kale watched through her eyes. He saw the chaos. He saw a marine pulled down by a dozen smaller swarm creatures. He saw another set on fire by plasma. The humans did not stop. They moved like a knife through rotten flesh, firing, throwing grenades, moving forward meter by terrible meter. They reached the tunnel, a vast, pulsing orifice leading down into the planet's heart. The fighting got closer, darker, more personal. The helmet cam showed flashes of alien forms in the gloom, the blinding light of muzzle flashes, sprays of dark fluid. Park Mina's breathing was heavy in Kale's ears. Han. Left flank. Choi, watch the ceiling. Keep moving. They lost people. Kale heard the calls over the comms. Reaper 4. Down. Reaper 7. I'm hit. Go on without me. Each call was a name, not a number. After an eternity of fighting down sloping, fleshy tunnels, they reached a vast cavern. In the center was the node. It was a gigantic, pulsing heart of bioluminescent tissue, connected to the walls by thick, vein-like cords. The sound in the cavern was a deep, psychic hum that made the video feed distort. Kim! Now! Park Mina yelled. covering the scientist as he stumbled forward. Dr. Kim Tae approached the monstrous heart. He did not look at it with disgust. He looked at it with a profound sadness. He placed his hand on a slick, warm surface, finding an access point. He inserted the data spike. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the central heart pulsed violently. The deep hum changed, fractured. It became a discordant wail, a scream of a billion voices suddenly feeling alone. The virus was not an explosion. It was a dissolution. The cavern walls shuddered. The vein-like cords began to wither and turn black. The swarm creatures around them staggered, their coordinated attacks breaking into confused, individual twitches. "Pull back," Park Mina ordered. "It's done. Everyone out." The retreat was just as bloody as the advance. But the swarm was no longer an army. It was a dying, confused animal lashing out. Back in orbit, on the bridge of the Steadfast, Lee Jun watched the biosigns from Omega-9 collapse in a cascading wave of silence. The planet didn't explode. It just died. In the medical bay, Park Mina sat, her armor off, her face bruised and exhausted. She looked at a list of names on a screen, her finger resting on one. Dr. Kim Tae sat in a corner, his head in his hands, weeping quietly for the terrible beauty he had helped to kill. Kale turned off the feed. His final report was not a report. It was a statement of fact. They have done it, not with superior firepower, but with a deeper understanding of their enemy and of themselves. They used a scholar's empathy as a weapon. They paid the price in individual, named lives. They walked into the heart of darkness not to destroy it with light, but to infect it with silence. They have shown that the cosmos's most terrifying force is not mindless consumption. It is the will of a protective, grieving heart that has decided enough is enough. The war is over. The swarm is broken. And we have unleashed something we do not comprehend. The bridge of the Steadfast was quiet. The constant, low hum of the engines was the only sound. On the main view screen, Omega-9 hung like a faded emerald, its sickly glow gone, replaced by the inert blackness of biological death. The war was over. Kale stood at the back of the bridge, his recording device inactive at his side. He no longer needed it. What he had to record now was not for the consensus archives. It was for himself. He watched Captain Lee Jun. The human commander stood before his command chair, his hands clasped behind his back. He was not looking at the victory on the screen. He was looking at a smaller secondary display. It held a simple list of names, arranged in 2 columns. The lost and the wounded. His eyes moved slowly down the first column, pausing on each one. His face showed no grand emotion. It showed weight. The immense, silent weight of being the one who had sent them all down to that green hell. Tia console nearby. Sergeant Park Mina was cleaning her sidearm. The action was methodical, almost gentle. She disassembled it, wiped each part with a cloth, and put it back together with smooth, practiced motions. Her face, usually so sharp and alert, was slack with exhaustion. Her eyes, when she glanced up at the list on the captain's screen, were old. They had seen too much. Yet, her hands never faltered. In the corner, Dr. Kim Tae sat with a datapad. He was not reading reports. He was looking at images of the precursor ruins from Kalidar. His shoulders were slumped. A single tear traced a clean line down his dusty cheek. He had used their beautiful, sad music as a template for a weapon. He had turned a lament into a killing note. He wept not for the swarm, but for the violation of understanding. Kale finally understood. The puzzle was complete, and the picture it formed was both beautiful and terrifying. They were not monsters. Monsters were simple. The Ravager swarm were monsters, all hunger, no thought. These humans were something else entirely. They were creatures of profound connection. They carried maps of each other's lives in their heads. Sisters' weddings, parents' faces, hometowns. They fought not for territory or resources, but to protect the fragile network of those connections. They grieved for each loss as a unique, universe-shattering event. And because they loved with such specificity, their wrath was equally specific. It was not a blind rage. It was a cold, focused, and utterly thorough calculation. They would endure any hardship, plan for any failure, and pay any price to cut the threat out at the root. They had looked at an interstellar horror and had not seen an unstoppable force. They had seen a problem to be solved, and they had solved it with a mix of brute force, scholarly empathy, and stubborn will. The cosmos had always feared the wrong thing. It feared the mindless devourer, the supernova, the cold void. These were simple dangers. Humanity was a complex one. They were protectors. And to threaten what they loved was to invite a response that was not about destruction, but about permanent correction. They would not just defeat you. They would understand you, find the single flaw in your existence, and exploit it with the same care they used to comfort a dying friend. Kale walked to a communication terminal. He entered his final access codes to the Observer network. He began to speak, his voice a soft whisper in the quiet bridge. "This is Observer Kale. Final report regarding the United Earth Federation and the Omega-9 campaign." He did not use technical terms. He did not quote statistics. "I witnessed mankind step onto the battlefield. I saw them as primitive, then as brutal, then as clever. I was wrong each time. They did not bring a new weapon to this war. They brought an old soul. A soul that knows how to love deeply, and because of that, knows how to fight forever." He looked at the three humans, each holding their own kind of silence. They measure victory not in enemy dead, but in promises kept to their own. Their strength is a paradox. Limitless compassion fused with limitless resolve. They are the most terrifying soldiers in existence because they are not soldiers first. They are people first, and they will turn all of their history, all of their art, all of their love, into a weapon to protect that simple idea. He paused, his gaze fixed on Li Jun's still back. "Do not fear their fleets. Fear their quiet conversations in corridors. Fear their names for each other. Fear their memory. Fear their grief. For when that grief turns outward, it becomes an engine that does not stop. The Ravager swarm consumed worlds. Humanity preserves them, and will obliterate anything that threatens their chosen world. The war is over. The cosmos must now learn to live alongside a species for whom war is not a profession, but a profound and terrible act of love." He sent the report. The console blinked. Transmission complete. Archive. He walked over to Captain Li Jun. The human captain turned from the list of names. "Observer Kale," Li Jun said, his voice hoarse. "Captain," Kale replied. He gave a slow, deep bow, not the formal bow of his people, but a bow of respect from one being to another. "I will take my leave. My work here is done." Li Jun simply nodded. No words were needed as Kale walked towards the shuttle bay. He passed a viewport. He saw the consensus ships, sleek and whole, already beginning their victory formations. He saw the human ships, battered and scarred, sitting quietly amongst them like weathered stones that he knew the galaxy would read his report. They would debate it, fear it, misunderstand it. But they would never look at humanity the same way again. They had asked for soldiers, and they had gotten something infinitely more dangerous. They had gotten guardians. And the cosmos, for the first time in millennia, held its breath.